Yo guys, what is up? It is Alex or Black Eye here. Similar to my video about ranked crossplay, this video is going to be kind of controversial. So strap in! Recently there's been a good bit of discussion around ranked and how to improve it within the SMITE community, so I thought I'd go in depth with how I think hires can improve their ranked game modes for Season 10, so that's what we're going to discuss today. These ideas and topics I'm going to discuss aren't perfect, and I understand that not everybody will agree with me, so feel free to leave your opinions in the comments. As always, just keep it civil. Before talking about solutions, we need to go over the problems that people are trying to solve because there isn't really a point in discussing solutions if you can't identify the problem. The first and most obvious problem is the lack of players. There is a general consensus that the ranked community is dying, and people believe this is due to there not being enough players to allow for good matchmaking. There are a handful of examples of ranked lobbies where lower elo players, let's say silver or gold players, are getting into lobbies consisting of much higher ranking players, upwards of diamond or even masters. This happens more often than it should, but it's important to understand that this is due to a lack of players in the queue and not due to SMITE matchmaking. I don't necessarily have proof of this, but this is just what I've learned from being an Olympian for 2 years, and that's pretty consistent with the evidence that's presented. For example, these bad lobbies usually happen very late at night when most people are asleep, and happen much less often during the day or during peak hours. I'm personally not super flustered over bad lobbies during times of the day where people aren't playing SMITE, because lobbies like these are going to happen regardless of what Hi-Rez does to improve ranked. But the fact that it's sometimes happening even during peak hours is a little bit concerning. Secondly, people believe there isn't much incentive to play the ranked game modes. This stems mostly from the high-level community, who get bored consistently reaching the top of the leaderboards, and then needing to quit rank altogether or play on a smurf when they hit the MMR cap. People also believe there should just be more rewards for hitting specific ranks or spots on the leaderboards, because they believe that adding more incentives or rewards will also help with the first issue, a lack of players. If there's more incentive to play ranked, then logically speaking, more people will play ranked. Those are what I believe to be the two most important issues people are highlighting when it comes to fixing the SMITE ranked game modes: the lack of players and the lack of incentives. Since they go hand in hand, we can talk about solutions that'll either affect one of the problems or both at the same time. I also think it's important to highlight that if SMITE grows as a game, then naturally the ranked player base will also grow. Hi-Rez is constantly working every day to draw more players into SMITE, so I'm not going to go into this any further, but it is important to note that. But what can Hi-Rez do specifically to the ranked game modes that'll increase the player base? Well, the first thing I'd like them to add for Season 10 is ranked crossplay. I have an entire video on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but SMITE currently has two ranked inputs: controller and mouse and keyboard. If you are queuing using a controller, you will not play against people using a mouse and keyboard, and vice versa. It's widely believed that there are about twice as many controller or console players than there are mouse and keyboard players. So from a mouse and keyboard perspective, this will essentially just triple the amount of players that they're used to, and from a controller perspective, it'll increase the amount of players by 50%. Again, I completely understand that this is a heavily debated topic, and I'd really recommend watching my previous video where I go very in-depth on this. But regardless of what side of the ranked crossplay argument you stand on, it is completely undeniable that combining controller and mouse and keyboard lobbies will objectively make matches more fair because there will be more total players. I'm also under the assumption that if ranked crossplay were to be implemented, it would be paired with a hard reset. The second idea that I'd like to see implemented is to uncap the MMR. Currently in SMITE, the maximum amount of MMR you can reach is 3,500. Once you hit that, there isn't really a reason to continue playing unless you just enjoy playing ranked by itself. I'm pretty sure the reason the MMR is capped is both to make sure matchmaking, well, isn't fucked, and to make sure the MMR gain or loss is fair at the top end. To put this into perspective, if you are at much higher MMR than what the average MMR is for the entire lobby, then you will gain a much smaller amount of MMR for winning the game. The same goes the other way around. If you are much lower than the average MMR, then you will gain more MMR than usual for winning. So if the MMR is uncapped, since there are so few players at the top end, then the MMR gain or loss will just be frustrating to these players. Based on this, uncapping the MMR sounds like a bad idea. But if Hi-Rez could implement a change where any player over 3,500 MMR is read by the algorithm as 3,500 MMR, then this wouldn't fuck up matchmaking. So let's say that there's a player with 5,000 MMR. The algorithm would read this 5,000 MMR player as a 3,500 MMR player, and match them with enemies or teammates accordingly. This idea actually helps with both issues, and another issue I haven't brought up yet. Uncapping the MMR will give players more incentive to play because ranked suddenly won't be a race to see who can hit 3500 MMR first. If you look at the leaderboards for any of the game modes on any input, the majority of the Grandmasters players are at 3500 and have stopped playing because, well, there's no reason to keep playing. But if the MMR is uncapped, there will be a constant battle to see who can maintain the #1 spot, therefore giving players more incentive to play ranked. I also believe it'll just get more people playing ranked in general, because a lot of ranked players live stream their matches. I really think that the SMITE audience on Twitch would be very interested to witness players fighting for rank 1 live on stream, therefore boosting people's live stream numbers. And if SMITE is more successful on Twitch, then naturally more people will be drawn to the game. Finally, uncapping the MMR would lead to less smurfing. For those that don't know, smurfing is when you play on an account with a lower rank or MMR than your main account to get into easier ranked lobbies. A lot of high-level ranked players do this after hitting 3500 MMR because, again, there isn't really an incentive to queue once you hit the cap. Playing on a smurf just allows people to continue queuing ranked without the risk of losing your 3500 MMR spot on the leaderboards. It wouldn't completely solve smurfing, as I believe most people that do smurf aren't even close to hitting the MMR cap, but I do think it would help even if it's just by a little bit. When it comes to the leaderboards, this one's just kind of petty, but I wish the leaderboard showed true MMR rather than in intervals of 25. I don't know why they display this, and it's probably due to some technical issue, but it's just kind of annoying seeing multiple people at the exact same MMR and you don't know who's ahead of who. This doesn't really relate to the problems that I discussed at the start of the video, but just something personal I'd like to see. When it comes to, quote, fixing ranked, I really don't think it's that deep, and those are the two biggest things that I'd like to see. Ranked crossplay and removing the MMR cap. But there are other fairly popular suggestions that people have been talking about that I don't personally agree with, but I still think it's worth going over. The first one being role queue. Role queue is the idea of having separate MMRs for each role. For example, the MMR for ADC would be different for jungle, and the algorithm would match players up accordingly based on the role that they're queuing. This would also guarantee that people get their role instead of just getting a role that they don't want to play. While this idea seems decent on paper, I think it would just absolutely destroy matchmaking and make games very unfair or uneven. It would also probably lead to much longer queue times. Think about support. How many people actually queue ranked with support as their first priority? If a true role queue was implemented, you'd probably have to wait much longer than usual so that the algorithm could find two people of similar MMR queuing support to then put in your game. The SMITE ranked player base is already pretty small, and adding role queue I think would add more negatives than positives. This might also fuck up the leaderboards because there would essentially need to be 4 brand new leaderboards to accommodate for the 4 new MMRs. I understand that it's impossible to provide proof of what I just talked about would happen. It's just something that I personally believe would happen if role queue is implemented. I also just think role queue goes against the spirit of ranked. I'm under the assumption that in order to achieve high ranks, you need to be able to adapt and play many different roles. Again, that's just a personal gripe I have with role queue, and doesn't necessarily mean it should or shouldn't be implemented. Another change people have been suggesting is just much better rewards for queuing ranked. There haven't been many specific ideas, but the ones I've seen range from gems when you reach a certain rank, all the way to entire skins that are only obtainable by hitting a certain rank. I know people aren't going to like this, but I truly believe that this idea boils down to good SMITE players just want more free shit. And I'll stand by that. Don't get me wrong, getting free shit is always awesome, but I don't think this will have as large as an impact as people think it will, especially considering that similar ideas have been in the game prior, and it led to a lot of dishonest players boosting for the rewards. Whether that be paying someone to play the game for them, or getting someone on the other team to purposefully throw the game so the other team can win. And I get that this already happens, but I think it happened on a much larger scale if there were even more rewards available for queuing ranked. I also understand that you could make this exact argument for any kind of incentive, but I do believe it'll be much worse if there are gem or skin incentives versus other kinds of incentives. But with that being said, I wouldn't actually mind more ranked rewards as long as they were a bit smaller and catered towards the lower elo players. Think of something like, I don't fucking know, an avatar that you get that displays the amount of times you hit a specific rank, similar to the one that displays how many gods that you have mastered. I just think people wanting an absurd amount of gems, or even going as far to say Hyra should make specific skins that are only obtainable by hitting Grandmasters or something, is a little bit of a stretch. Most Masters or Grandmasters player are going to play regardless of the incentive, and again, I truly believe it just boils down to good SMITE players just want more free shit. Also, from a business standpoint, it doesn't really make sense to give away large rewards to ranked players, because if they give away too much, then they're just losing money. It's also worth noting that whatever Hi-Rez spends time on, it means that they are spending less time on something elsewhere. SMITE is a free game, and because of this, I'm personally okay with not being given much for queuing ranked. When it comes to incentives, I truly believe that the #1 incentive for queuing ranked is just reaching ranks you haven't hit before. The point of ranked is to see how high you can climb and reaching new personal bests. I remember the first time I hit Grandmasters on controller, or the first time I hit Masters on keyboard and mouse using a controller. It felt so good. The grind I've endured is finally paying off, and that satisfaction is infinitely more rewarding than if I were to just receive a skin or something for playing. I just think there's a bit of a disconnect between the high-level community and others, because when it comes to this, those people are just so fucking good at the game, where hitting Masters or Grandmasters means absolutely nothing to them now. I know hitting Masters or Grandmasters for me doesn't mean much, but goddamn did it feel good the first time it happened. That's also why I think they should uncap the MMR like I discussed previously, because then these high-ranking players would be able to have something satisfying to fight for, a high-ranking spot on the leaderboards. Before I end the video, I'd like to quickly fire off my thoughts on some other ideas community members have had. This video is already pretty long, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. A big reason a lot of players don't queue ranked is due to the toxicity. Many people are under the impression that ranked is just much more toxic than casuals, which can turn people off from the game mode. I actually agree with this. I've seen much more toxicity queuing ranked than any other game mode. Although there isn't really anything Hi-Rez can do to ranked specifically to combat this. They are continuously improving their report and support ticket system, which will also impact toxicity in ranked. Also, just as a quick pro tip, you can actually report people directly to Hi-Rez support by submitting a support ticket. Just make the subject player report and provide as many details as possible. You can even attach a screenshot or a video. You used to not be able to do this, and this is just one example of how Hi-Rez has been improving. I'm sure there are many other things they are doing behind the scenes that we just don't know about yet. Another idea I've seen people suggest is have ranked to be solo queue only. This would actually improve matchmaking, but fuck that, duo queue is dope. While yes, solo queue only would objectively improve matchmaking, this is the one suggestion I'm willing to say that I'll take whatever negatives duo queue will have over forcing everyone to solo queue. I've also seen people suggest that MMR should be based on performance rather than whether you win or lose. Again, sounds good on paper, but would be impossible to implement without being abused. MMR is based on KDA? Fuck doing objectives, I'm now a KDA player. MMR is based on player damage? Yeah, good luck climbing on support. MMR is based on, I don't know, fucking structure damage? Congrats, there is now a split push meta. Again, and this is just my personal opinion, performance-based MMR is just impossible to implement without finding an easy way to abuse it. And finally, I personally don't see a reason to have both MMR and TP. I think they should just ditch TP altogether and have rank be solely based on MMR. They already have an outline of what each rank correlates to in MMR in the actual game itself, and having both TP and MMR will just confuse newer players. Although, when it comes to Joust and Duel, there might have to be some changes based on how MMR gain or loss is determined. This is because these game modes have significantly less players than Conquest, and some people literally get like 1 to 6 MMR per game, especially at the top end. But other than that, I don't really think ditching TP would change that much and would just avoid confusion. That's about everything I wanted to talk about, and again, I know everyone won't agree with me, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this video, and maybe also ideas that weren't in the video that you might have. Thanks again for watching. This has been Black Eye, and I'll see you in the next video.
These are just stories. This shit still so cold when it drop. It's gonna be a motherfucking snow day. Hey, boys, good in